About a month ago, I was on a Zoom call with people from the Baptist Peace Fellowship from various parts of the US, South America, and Canada. In my discussion group were clergy, theologians, and well informed lay people, and somehow the conversation turned to the question, what part of the Bible do you preach from the most? The Old Testament or the New Testament? The large majority of the participants declared that much of their preaching is drawn from the New Testament, and especially the Gospels. And one black woman, a minister in the US, declared that for her people, the delivery of Israel from slavery in Egypt was a crucial biblical story. It gave them hope, for it said to them, God does not forget people who are suffering oppression. Last Sunday, we considered God's hand in that spectacular and miraculous crossing of the Red Sea. And today we continue the story of the people of Israel as they headed to a land they hoped would be theirs. 3 days after the incredible triumph of the Red Sea, they arrived at Marah in the wilderness of Shur. Their thirst was overwhelming, but the water at Marah was bitter, and the people were unable to drink it. And Moses threw a tree into the water, and the water became sweet. And those of you who like typology can think ahead to another tree, the cross. The bitterness of suffering and death, and the sweetness of the good news that the cross displays to us of God's incredible love. After another 3 days of trudging through the desert sand, they arrive at Elim, a desert oasis, abundant with springs and palms. Life is beautiful and comfortable, and life for us at times is just like that. We have a taste of God's grace and goodness, and these times are like gems and garlands along life's journey, and we are grateful to be alive. We wish we could save that time in a bottle, but we cannot stop the slow grind of change and decay. The Israelite community pushes on. Ahead of them is a vast, trackless desert. The scant provisions that they brought with them from their flight from Egypt are so very quickly exhausted. And even if you've never been to a desert, you know what it might be like. The desert place is a place of intense heat, with no shade for coolness. Death becomes an imminent reality. Life is difficult to sustain. And there are desert places through life. And you know about them. Here's a person who reaches the prime of his or her career, filled with anticipation of dreams yet to be, with retirement perhaps around the corner. Then a malignant and malignant cell appears in the body, and everything stops dead in its tracks. A family is torn, ripped apart by divorce. The longed-for pregnancy arrives and is a source of wonderful joy until the day the child is born, with serious disabilities and minimal chances of survival. Or think of what is happening with the COVID. It is still a dark, menacing crowd over our lives. What will happen to the economy? Will there be a second wave? How serious will it be? How many will die? Most of us have lived long enough and have had enough experience to know that life can be treacherous. For the people of Israel, conditions were so extreme and dangerous, they became nostalgic for their former condition. We are hungry. They whined to Moses. Oh, how we wish that the Lord had just put us to death while we were still in the land of Egypt. There we could sit by the pots cooking meat and eat our fill of bread. Instead, you have brought us out to this desert to starve this whole assembly to death. Their misery and fear must have been massive to make them think of Egyptian slavery was better than desert freedom. But you can understand their feelings. There are times when you may feel that God has abandoned you. You cannot predict what might come, and you don't know what to do. Do you curse God or say he does not exist? So often when people say they don't believe in God, they're not so much saying they don't believe there is God or a higher power or some vague omnipotent force somewhere out there, or disbelieve in the idea of divinity. What they're saying is that they doubt there's anyone out there who is there for them. Isn't that what we really want to know about God? When someone cries out in anguish, "Where is God?" they're not inquiring into God's address, wondering where God lives. They are asking, why doesn't God show up? Why is God absent in my time of need? We want to know, will God be there for me? Faith and experience says yes. What are the lessons from our text? As I was preparing this message, I thought it would be great to come up with 5Gs. We hear about 5G with Huawei and other communication giants, and I thought it would be easy to remember 5Gs, but I could only come up with 3Gs without straining the meaning of our text. 3Gs, which you can remember from this text, this passage: grumbling, greed, and grace. We know how easy it is for us to be trapped into a cycle of complaining and grumbling. God knows we have enough reasons to complain in life. But to be trapped in that space makes you a negative person. Said Carl Menninger, complainers focus on themselves and not on God's goodness or the needs of their neighbors or God's purposes for their lives. In these days of the COVID, it is easy to be negative and to be down and to complain. Count your blessings. Learn to fill the cup of your life with good things, with gratitude and grace. I love the analogy someone posted on Facebook. You're holding a cup of coffee when someone comes along and bumps into you and shakes your arm, making you spill your coffee everywhere. Why did you spill your coffee? Because someone bumped into me. Wrong answer. You spilled the coffee because there was coffee in your cup. Had there been tea in your cup, you would have spilled tea. Whatever is inside the cup is what you will spill out. Therefore, when life comes along and shakes you, whatever is inside you will come out. It is easy to fake it until you are rattled. So we have to ask ourselves, what's in my cup? When life gets tough, what spills over? Joy, gratefulness, peace, humility, anger, bitterness, harsh words and reactions. Life provides the cup. You choose how to fill it. You can work at filling your cup with gratitude, forgiveness, joy, words of affirmation, and kindness, gentleness, and love. Love that you want to offer to others. So many of these are fruit of the Spirit, aren't they? This is a little posting drawn from Alison Waller. If you struggle with grumbling and complaining, and that's part of your part of your habit, make it a matter of prayer. We can speak of the warning about greed. They were to collect manna enough for each day. But some of them could not help themselves. They collected more manna than they needed, only to discover it would not keep. We are caught up in a culture that promotes greed. We are wooed by perhaps 6 commercials per break in a TV show, bombarded by promises of easy, no-pain credit, and seduced by beautiful faces promising that we can enjoy the lifestyles of the rich and famous. Now, it's not wrong to want things or to have things, but we are frequently confusing wants and needs and greeds. We've come to believe the lies that come with greed, that it's okay to be greedy. We have shut our ears to God's commands, that we are to be good stewards of everything over which we have dominion, the earth, the plants, the animals, and even the care of our sisters and brothers. We fail to hear Jesus' words to the man who kept building bigger and bigger barns. You fool, this very night your soul will be required of you. There are some things in life which are transient, and it is the wise person who will discern what is lasting and eternal. And finally, this passage leads us to grace. Our text says something remarkable about what the people of Israel discovered. They looked towards a harsh, unrelenting desert, and there they saw the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. In that very place which we may seek to avoid, God is present and His glory is revealed. I wonder if you have discovered that to be true in your faith journey. Perhaps you're frightened and feel alone, and God is there. Sometimes it is a presence which blankets you. Sometimes it is the arrival of another person who comes alongside you with a heart of love. And he or she is truly an angel of love. And the only explanation that works for you is that God intervened in a miracle. In spite of their grumbling, in spite of their short memory of all that God had done for them, God continues to be there for them. In the evening, there is quail, and in the morning, manna from heaven. We can see in this miracle of the manna a token of God's loving patience and long-suffering grace. Where would any of us be but for God's patience and grace? We are not so superior and great moral and ethical giants. We fail continually, but God continues to be gracious and kind. He answers their whimpering unbelief and snide, sneering complaints with an expression of love, food for each day. And it comes into our lives in remarkable ways. I wonder if the name Joy Davidman means anything to you. Think about it as I tell you a portion of her story, and the context of her life might come to you. She was a brilliant writer. She was raised by parents who were militant non-believers. She graduated with top honors from Hunter College, began her adult life with a kind of cynical sophistication and skepticism which expects the worst and believes the least of others or of the world. In her arrogant intellectual pride, she conceived of religion and morality havens for the neurotic, upon which only the untutored would depend. Her husband was also successful, and they bought a lovely house in the country. Then one day her husband, who had been growing more and more depressed, it seemed, called from another city and told her he was losing his mind, that life no longer mattered to him, and he sent her into shocking despair by abruptly hanging up and saying no more. Joy Davidman was in the country with her children. She didn't know where her husband was in the city, and she was desperate. She felt hopeless and helpless. All she could do was phone some friends in the city to help and then wait with quiet desperation and despair. Then something happened, and she shares what happened. And she says, there was another person with me in the room, a presence so real that all my previous life was by comparison mere shadow play. I think I must have been the world's most astonished atheist. My awareness of Christ's presence was not conjured up. It was not simply a matter of imagination to bolster me about my husband. No, it was terror and ecstasy, repentance and rebirth. I guess I should tell you who Joy Davidman is. By now you have probably Googled it. She was the Joy who married C.S. Lewis. Into the life of an atheist or any of us, God works with loving patience and abundant grace to reveal himself as one who loves us deeply. You know the story of the feeding of the 5,000. John's Gospel offers us the extended dialogue which followed that feeding, the dialogue that Jesus had with the crowds that were following him. He says to them, "You seek me because you ate the fill of the loaves." And then he challenged them, "Do not labor for food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life." And then he confuses them when he says, "I am the bread of life." It's one of those great "I am" statements which points to his divinity. God provides through Christ our deepest needs, and he provides those needs fresh every morning. Let him and his teaching be your daily inspiration and nourishment. There are three teachings in the passage: grumbling, greed, and grace. And the greatest of these is grace.